The Madeira Islands, belonging to Portugal, extend 900 kilometers from the mainland in the Atlantic Ocean near the Moroccan Casablanca. From the archipelago, only 2 islands are inhabited: the main island, Madeira, of 750 square kilometers, and Porto Santo, of altogether 45 square kilometers. Some of the islands, Ilhas Desertas and Ilhas Selvagens, for example, are nothing more than bare rocks without fresh water. On the islands with richer vegetation, in declared conservation areas, many species of animals live, most of which are birds. Madeira is volcanic in nature. There are 2 mountains on it. Pico Rivo is 1,862 meters high, and Pol de Serra exceeds 1,600 meters. The mountains are encircled by high, hilly country, and often spectacular steep cliffs drop into the sea. The Atlantic Flower Island became the target of international tourism, particularly through its beautiful landscapes. It has relatively few historic and artistic monuments, but is all the richer in natural beauties. Volcanic rocks, basalt blocks, deep canyons, beaches with black sand, and cloud-covered peaks are characteristic of it, as well as the thousands of shades of green between the blue sky and the blue ocean. Although it's geographically closer to Africa than Europe, its weather, thanks to the Atlantic Ocean with its balancing effect, is pleasantly summery all year round. It means that the temperature doesn't go below 18 degrees Celsius even in winter, and is rarely warmer than 25 degrees Celsius in summer. The seawater reaches a maximum of 23 to 24 degrees Celsius only in August and September, but is never below 17 degrees Celsius even in winter. It rarely rains between June and September, while at other times a sudden shower can always occur. The weather is suitable for touring, hiking, and cycling, but take a raincoat along. Swimmers arrive mostly in the months of July, August, and September. Porto Santo, with its 8-kilometer-long golden yellow sand and its weather, which is warmer and drier than the mother islands, is becoming more and more a beach island. The distance between the 2 islands is only 25 kilometers. Ferries and ships go regularly. In addition, there's an airport on Porto Santo too. The approximately 300,000 inhabitants make their living by farming, grape cultivation, fishing, and tourism. The name of the Madeira Islands is inseparably entwined with lace and wine. You can taste wine in hotels and in better restaurants too, but don't miss visiting the Madeira Wine Company, where you can also buy the bottled nectar relatively cheaply. As is the case with agriculture, the growing of vegetables and fruits, also animal husbandry, fishing, and the food industry have taken a backseat to tourism, meaning that the role of the hotel industry on the island has become more and more important. The Madeira Islands strive for qualitative tourism and don't want to be a mecca for backpackers. There are only 2 camping sites in all, one on Madeira and one in Porto Santo. Private accommodations are also rare. Mountain huts only serve as temporary shelters. The most frequented places are the 3, 4, and 5-star hotels and apartments. Besides the famous international hotel chains, there's a high-level Portuguese hotel chain with nothing but 4- and 5-star hotels. Paradors and pousades are extremely fashionable in Spain and Portugal. These are luxury hotels in castles, country houses, and in other special places. Because of their intertwined history, you can find similar places in Morocco, so, of course, they can't be missing from the Madeira Islands either. Here, they're called quintas. It isn't a cheap amusement, but an unforgettable experience. Speaking of accommodation, it should be mentioned that huge holiday cruisers keep away from the island. Their passengers spend the nights on board enjoying all conveniences. They only anchor for the sake of walks, excursions, and evening programs. All the hotels have a swimming pool. In fact, most of them provide complete service, including an aqua park, Turkish bath, steam bath, Scottish shower, jacuzzi, sauna, solarium, and massage. There are hotels specifically for fitness, wellness, and thalassotherapy. The Madeira Islands are a more and more popular target for conference tourism and also for incentive trips. almost all the hotels have a business center, conference room, and audiovisual equipment. Self-sufficiency lovers can make a request for an apartment with a kitchen, but those who seek real repose can choose half or full board too. And the activities aren't limited to hiking. High mountains afford the opportunity for paragliding, while the flatlands have some excellent golf courses. The golf course of Machico was designed by one of the best-known golf course architects, Robert Trent Jones. The overall effect of many holiday paradises is lessened when expensive hotels, which were designed with care, have been built by cheap and less than diligent construction workers. All the hotels on the Madeira Islands were built and are operated with the greatest of care. This and the kindness of the staff also contribute to the guests' well-being. On the islanders' faces, there's no trace of the melancholy so characteristic of Portuguese people. They're open-hearted, friendly, and pleasantly easygoing. They like emphasizing that in the first place, they're from the Madeira Islands and only in the second place from Portugal. Because of the business connections maintained with South America, many people speak Spanish and English thanks to the British influence. These days, people working in the catering industry are learning the German language quite diligently. Among the hotels, you can find one where 4 luxury suites have been furnished according to the atmosphere and colors of the 4 seasons. One of the hotel's restaurants has a unique appearance, and its courtyard is graced with a fountain. You can have your meal in the kitchen, in the dining room, in the living room, or in the library. This arrangement conforms to the traditional layout of manor houses. Almost 90% of those who visit the island stay in the capital city or in its immediate vicinity. This is why Funchal is the starting point of tours. The town was given its name from the wild fennel which grows abundantly here. You can smell its spicy fragrance on the hillsides above the town nowadays, too. The weather isn't really drafty on the island, even in summer. Thanks to this, vegetation is rich, green, and blooming all year round. In the north, woods of indigenous bay trees still grow. Lichen covers the tree trunks, and at the bottom, ferns grow. Knotty briars are ancient. Daisies and ladies' gloves grow wild. Gardens are colored by azalea and rhododendron, and on the streets, hydrangea and agapanthus, the lily of the Nile, are common. The eucalyptus woods and acacia gardens are hand-planted. There are rosewood, Madeira mahogany, and cottonwood trees. The African tulip tree bursts into scarlet blossoms. The bougainvillea climbs up walls and fences. And we haven't even mentioned the numerous botanical gardens which almost compete with each other as to where the scarcer, more beautiful, and more particular plants are. Especially beautiful are the orchid gardens in Funchal and the botanical garden in Monte at the terminal point of the cable railway. In addition, the flower shops are spectacular. The florists still wear old, colorful national costumes. The first stop of the tour, showing the island's west side, is a small fishing village. Sailors and fishermen have always been considered superstitious, faithful people, which is why they have their own chapels in a lot of ports. This is the case in Câmara de Lobos, too. The walls of the chapel Nossa Senhora de Conceição are decorated with paintings representing São Pedro, the patron saint of Portuguese sailors. The port of Câmara de Lobos is one of the most colorful places of the island. The fishing boats painted in strong colors are extremely characteristic of the seacoasts of Portugal. Of all the places on the islands, you can see the largest number of them here. They not only dance on the water, many of them are pulled up to the sand and are painted and repaired there. Since the stormy wind often inhibits fishermen from taking to water, they while away their time with the maintenance of their riggings. They scratch at the barnacles, mend the nets, and repair their long rods. The most popular fish of Madeira Islands is the black swordfish, the espada. It's caught using especially long rods. The huge animal with its cylinder-like body lives in a depth of 2,000 meters, but at night, in expectation of prey, it comes up to 500 to 600 meters. Then they're hooked using squid bait. The fish, glittering in all the colors of the rainbow, succumbs to the bends before it ever reaches the surface. The low pressure does away with it. From this, also its color changes, and by the time it gets to the counter of the fish market, its body is a shining black. 3,000 tons of these tasty creatures are caught every year. The especially long swords are mounted and usually hung up on the walls of fish restaurants. In fact, a great deal of the fish is served right here, while the others are sold to cold storage plants and packing houses. The boats of the swordfish fishermen, the espaderos, are open, and also their form differs from the ships of fishermen fishing with trawls. In the ports, the skins of squids and dogfish can often be seen hanging out to dry. The village of São Vicente, meaning St. Vincent, was given its name because the martyrs' bones were preserved here, then taken to the Portuguese capital city. Since that time, St. Vincent has been the patron saint of Lisbon. For those who are interested in geology, a geological excursion has been established in a 70-meter-long lava cave, and the botanical garden is home to practically all the plants which can be found on the Madeira Islands. But the main site is the parish church from the 17th century. On the black and white mosaic pavement in front of the entrance, a sailboat and 2 ravens are visible. These are the saint's attributes. Of course, the frescoes of the ceiling are decorated with images from the saint's life. The high altar is a carved wooden altar richly covered with gold leaf, called tauja dourada here. Picturesque cobblestone streets, pretty cottages, and small shops are characteristic of the settlement. The locals observe the holiday of the Holy Ghost based on ancient traditions at Whitsun. The custom, which was in fashion in continental Portugal in the days of King Denis, was brought to the island by Zarco. A heavily laden table awaited everyone at the celebration. The hearty meal was the responsibility of the King of Whitsuntide, elected every year. Although the Catholic Church has prohibited this holiday, a lot of families observe it even today. Porto Muniz, a small wine grower village, was accessible almost only on foot until the middle of the 20th century. Excavation of the winding road into the rocks at the seaside began at that time. Although it's been widened and severed by a tunnel since then, it isn't without dangers even now with its narrow bypasses and waterfalls which give passing cars a shower. On top of that, more and more tourist buses come here, bringing passengers who've booked a one-day optional tour. Since the restaurants of this place are famous for their excellent fresh seafood, the price of the tour includes a several-course meal and local wines. A lot of Portuguese families have a holiday home here, making it hard to find a table on the restaurant's terrace in the summer season. The rock bath of Porto Muniz is so particular that it shouldn't be missed. The designers imagined a huge shallow pool in the hollow of basalt rocks. It's certainly safer than swimming in the sea, but because of the waves sweeping into the pool, it isn't any less romantic. Sometimes swimmers are joined by some fish, quite by accident. You can find the island's other attractions northeast from here. Pico de Arrero is the island's third highest peak. In clear weather, a spectacular view unfolds before us, and pictures taken from here seem like aerial photographs. The sunny hillsides covered thickly with bay trees, the canyons and the ravines jet black, and farther away, the clouds that cast a shadow on the sea. Unforgettable. You can travel by car up to Pico de Arrero. High up, a car park, a mountain climber's refuge, and a snack bar await you. From this place, 2 roads lead to the island's peak, to the 1,818-meter-high Pico Ruivo. The walking tour lasts approximately 5 hours round trip. The difference in level is only 43 meters. The aqueduct is a specialty of Madeira Islands, or as it's called here, levada. Earlier in the Roman Empire, a similar one was used, but it's never been developed as effectively as here. The total length of the network leading from the main channel to the terraced croplands is close to 5,000 kilometers. In the mountains of the Madeira Islands, you can still see many gurgling springs. The water of these was directed to sugar plantations in the 15th century. The paths along the levadas became convenient and safe ways for hikers. You can obtain maps of the levadas and walking tours in the bookshops in Funchal. The travel agencies offer a wide selection of walking and mountain tours, rock climbing, whitewater rafting, adventure and survival tours, as well as mountain cycling, jeep, and horse riding tours. The first guests, who were almost exclusively rich European aristocrats, were invited to the island in the 10th century. Some sought convalescence. Others only escaped from the long, cold winter. At that time, there were barely 1 or 2 luxury hotels, even in Funchal. The Madeira Islands became more widely known and were included in the selection of travel agencies only in the 1980s. There's now capacity for approximately 30,000 guests, and this number is steadily increasing. The support of the European Union enables the country villas to be converted into hotels in the same way as it enables the building of modern hotel complexes. Tourism currently provides 5,000 workplaces. The water of mountain streams and springs are also used in trout breeding. The dwellers of the hatchery are moved into bigger and bigger basins as they grow, then upon reaching the desired size, they end up on plates in restaurants. Smoked trout, for example, is quite common here. A lot of fish is consumed on Madeira, such as salmon and trout, and of course swordfish and tuna, baked or dipped in batter. Fish soup made with onions, red peppers, and potatoes is similar to the American chowder, while arroz de mariscos resembles the Spanish paella. For fish dishes here, baked banana or fried sweet potatoes are the typical trimmings. Among meats, young goat is considered a delicacy, and for more important holidays and bigger appetites, espetada. This is beef roasted on a spit, which is hung above the guests' tables from the rafters. The locals serve it with cornmeal cut into cubes and fried in oil, but for foreigners, they usually serve French fries. The beefsteak is perfect, and the chefs of the island are excellent in preparing first-rate international foods. Almost all of them have studied in a famous European hotel or restaurant. In simpler countryside restaurants, delicious one-course dishes are served, like feijoada, made of beans, chili sausages, and bacon. Actually, this is the same as its similarly named Spanish and Portuguese relatives. The other national dish is cozido, a mix of beef and several vegetables, including green beans, peppers, courgettes, onions, and tomatoes. The majority of desserts are very sweet, but we can eat ice cream or fruit instead. By all means, we should try the locally produced bananas as long as we can. These small-sized but very tasty fruits are grown on the sunny hills of the island. As the plantations demand a lot of manual labor, and as for growing only 1 kilogram of bananas, nearly 1 hectoliter of water is necessary, cultivation is not particularly economical. The possible termination of the Portuguese protective tariffs might put an end to banana cultivation on Madeira. The steep, rocky slopes become a wide plateau at Santana. The terraced fields here are very suitable for vegetable and fruit growing, and also a lot of willows are planted here. The twigs cut from them during spring are used for basket weaving. Tourists may believe that they'll see small, triangle-shaped thatched houses painted with happy colors all over the island. Actually, these kinds of buildings are only typical in Santana and its immediate surroundings. The local authorities try to protect these small houses scattered about. Some of them are already just for tourist purposes, with small exhibitions or souvenir shops inside, but some are still inhabited. As only boards and reeds are used as construction materials, there's no bathroom in the house, nor any kitchen, in order to avoid fires. Nowadays, these facilities are located in a brick addition to the house. Traditionally, the living room and the parental bedroom used to be on the ground floor, while the children's rooms were upstairs. Considering the sizes, it's not surprising that today only lonely old people live in these huts. However, in the vineyards above Santana, these are also used as wine press houses or as weekend houses. The Casa de Colmos used to be homes for the poor. Well-to-do people lived in simple houses in Funchal. We can see many row houses of this kind even today above the St. Lawrence Fortress and in the Old Town. The really rich, especially the sugar barons, landowners, and vineyard owners, lived on their property in noble houses arranged around a central court. Interestingly, these were quite similar to the luxurious palaces of the Latin American sugar barons. Fountains often cooled the shady, friendly inner courtyards. The common premises, the living room, library, music hall, and dining room opened from here, while from the gallery running around the first floor, the luxuriously furnished rooms of the family members could be reached. Some of these noble lodges, called quinta, have been transformed into hotels in our days. The former public buildings represent 2 styles, the Manuel and the Baroque. In the 15th century, when King Manuel I came to the throne, a new architectural style formed all over Portugal. This was a version of the Gothic in which the most glaring feature was richly hewn stone ornamentation. The themes, as can also be seen in the churches in Lisbon and Algarve, were boating, discoveries, and exotic sea creatures. Both at this time and also later, when constructing churches and public buildings, murahar, or carved wooden roofs, and azulejo, which were tile decorations of Moorish origin, were very typical. The similarly exaggerated decorative Baroque followed the manual style. This is especially evident on the gold leaf-covered main and side altars of the churches and on the facades of many municipal public buildings. The typical furniture on the island in the 17th century was made of sugar crates. The sugar loaf imported from Brazil was packed in reddish-brown, rather hard mahogany boxes. The people on Madeira liked this kind of crate so much that they asked the local masters to make furniture from them, decorated with wrought iron straps and mosaics. Today, an old piece can cost a fortune. The mountains on Madeira are higher than 1,500–1,600 meters, providing a good opportunity for paragliding to see the fascinating panorama from a bird's-eye view. Pico de Arreiro, Poca da Neva, Pico de Urzes, and Pau de Serra are suitable starting points for this sport, as these peaks can be approached by car. The Camacha, built on the plateau, is famous for several things. The tower of the cafe on the main square looks like Big Ben in London, and this is no coincidence. A wealthy English sportsman had the house built. There's a memorial plaque on its wall saying that the first football game of the island was played in 1875, where this English gentleman was the referee. From the tower and from the lookout tower next to it, we can have a view all the way to the ocean, above the forest of terraced cultivated bay and eucalyptus trees. However, very often, even the neighboring house cannot be seen, as from autumn to spring, there's often thick fog here. Camacha is also famous for its handcrafts, mainly for its basket makers. In the nearby valleys, there are willows, from which twigs are collected in March. First, these are cooked in an iron kettle in order to soften their skin, which is then removed. The twigs are sorted by size, and after bundling and drying, they're taken to the processing place. Today, the exhibited braided animals are very rare. The production of giraffes, elephants, panthers, deer, and other animals is so difficult that only some old masters know the secrets. In the huge store, we can obtain anything that can be made by the braiding of twigs, bark, or straw. This includes straw hats, shopping baskets, and bread baskets, as well as decorative household items, from trays to wicker furniture. On the lower floors, we can even observe the manufacturing process. All stages of the work can be seen, from the husking through preparing the wooden frame up to the braiding. We can also buy souvenirs of other kinds in the store. Trays decorated with azulejo are especially beautiful. Naturally, the local rum and spirits are sold in wicker bottles. Funchal is not only the capital of the island, but also the most inhabited settlement. Susanna Lips, a geographer and a fan of the island, writes, "Besides its pleasant climate and magically beautiful location, it presents several sights: majestic palaces surrounding shady inner courtyards, noble country mansions hiding in prolific parks, churches, convents, and quite a lot of interesting museums. And especially, it's been able to preserve its really individual image. In its markets and shopping streets, the bustle is enormous. Its harbor is continuously busy, no stop for even a minute. In the daytime, on the terraces of the street cafes or the coastal promenades, the invigorating breeze fans our face from the south, and in the evening, when sitting in the pubs of the old city, we feel like we already belong here." Funchal, together with its suburbs, has nearly 130,000 inhabitants, and it's only obvious in the evening, when it's illuminated, how big its territory is. Manta is a very interesting settlement. It's built right above the capital on the mountain. In the 19th century, many rich people, among them also foreigners, had their villas here surrounded by huge parks. A cog railway used to go up to the villa quarter, but it was stopped during World War II. Its bridge and terminus still exist, but today we can get here from the old town by cable railway. The center of Manta is Largo de Manta. On this small square is a marble well, Manta Virgin's Chapel, and a street cafe. On the square, musicians dressed in national costume often entertain the visitors. Steep stairs lead to the front of Nossa Senhora de Monte. Like so many churches, also this one has the legend that the Virgin Mother appeared to someone, in this case, a herdsman's daughter. Nobody else saw the appearance but the small girl, but a Madonna statue was found nearby, and above this, first a small, then later a larger and larger church was built, which finally received a great honor in 1922. A real king was buried here, the last Habsburg ruler, Charles IV. The Allied forces banished the Austrian emperor and Hungarian king to the island. In 1921, he made an unsuccessful attempt to get his throne back, and a year later, he died. His wife, Queen Zita, settled in Switzerland. Trying to go down the steep mountain slope with a horse and carriage would have been frightfully difficult. Therefore, they invented a sled, which slides on a wooden bottom and is made of nothing else but braided willow twigs. This vehicle is a real spectacle even today. It's driven by two people. Jules Verne wrote the following about them. On the steep climbs, carros may not have been seen. These were perfectly substituted here by the carrinho, a kind of sled, which wonderfully adjusts to these mountain slopes. We could see these every few minutes as they slid down, driven by two muscular men who pulled them with ropes fixed to the front of the vehicle. The cable railway that connects the old town of Funchal and Monte was made by a famous Austrian firm, which has several hundred such constructions operating in the Alps. The 39 air-conditioned cabins, each with 7 seats, can deliver 800 passengers in an hour. The one-way running time is 15 minutes. There are no written records of the ancient history of the island. The first Portuguese ships arrived here in 1317. On the Medici world map, it first appeared in 1351, called Isola de Legnama. This means tree island and is a word-by-word translation of the Portuguese name. A Scottish youth, a certain Robert McKean, fell in love with Count Dorset's daughter Anne in London. However, the father wanted his daughter to marry a courtier. Therefore, the lovers eloped, setting out to sea to go to France. On their way, they drifted far away from their target and were shipwrecked. They landed on the island of Madeira, at this point where today the Machico settlement is. Many connect this name to McKean's name. Probably due to the adverse circumstances, the lovers soon died. Their shipwrecked fellows buried them in a common grave, put a crucifix on it, and asked later comers to build a church here. One of the survivors, Juan de Morales, was captured by Moorish pirates, escaped only decades later, and reached the Portuguese royal court. His stories encouraged João Gonçalves Zarco, Tristão Vaz Teixeira, and the Italian Palestrello, whose grandchild, Filipa Munhoz, later became Columbus's wife. They took possession of the island in 1419. Zarco became the captain of the island, and settlers started to arrive. A mysterious stranger arrived here at this time, who identified himself only as St. Catherine's Knight. The latest researches have brought astonishing results. It seems the man was Jagiello Ulaslo, Hungarian and Polish King Vladislav III, who hadn't died in battle, fighting on János Hunyadi's side, as it had been supposed earlier. His body was never found, so it's possible that surviving the battle, he attributed it to God and made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. When returning from there, he asked the Portuguese king for land on the newly explored Madeira so he could live the rest of his life on the edge of the world in voluntary exile. Columbus also lived in Madeira for a while, and later Captain Cook landed here 3 times. Funchal was already proclaimed a city in 1508. Pirates robbed the city several times. The brutal attack in 1566 is especially memorable. An adventurer called Montluc and his marauders occupied the city almost without any resistance. They massacred the 250 citizens who escaped to the St. Lawrence fortress. As they didn't have any ammunition for the guns, they couldn't defend themselves. The pirates ravaged the palaces and churches for 15 days and took anything that could be moved. The Clarissa sisters also escaped from their monastery and hid away in an almost inaccessible valley far away on the island. This place is called Corral das Freiras, which means nun stable. Later, the island fell into Spanish hands, and the new owners built, as a defense against pirates, the city wall and fortress system of Funchal, which was removed only in the 19th century. During the Napoleonic Wars, the French occupied Portugal, prompting England to send 2,000 soldiers to Madeira. Many of them settled and established their families here. On his way to St. Helena, even Napoleon himself stopped here. Many other rulers were also here, for example, Emperor Maximilian on his way to Mexico, Prince Albert of Monaco, and the similarly named Belgian king. Here, Sissi, Franz Josef's wife, tried to recover from her tuberculosis, and she lived in the Quinta Vidia villa in Funchal. The Habsburgs' affection for Madeira was also demonstrated by Charles IV. Among the local famous citizens, they mentioned the drama writer Baltasar Diaz, the painter Vieira Portuensa, and Francisco Franco. But the composers Saint-Saëns, Churchill, and Gogo Coitino also visited here. The archipelago gained autonomy in 1901. The only military event during World War I here was that all German property on Madeira was seized, an action urged by the British, and in response, a German submarine torpedoed 2 French warships in the harbor of Funchal. World War II sidestepped the island, which became a member of the European Community in 1986, and later of the European Union. As a result, from 2002, the official currency is the euro. The new cargo harbor of Funchal had been set up by the time the city had lost its importance as a transit stop for the delivery of goods between Europe and America. Most of the cargo ships bring only goods needed on the island. There are few export goods, mainly bananas, which are delivered to the mother country. The ferry from Porto Santo and the enormous tourist cruisers stop here. There are many of these, and not only during the peak season in summer, but also many people visit to see the Christmas lights and the fireworks on New Year's Eve. In autumn, a regatta crossing the Atlantic Ocean departs from here. Next to the seaside promenade on the Pebble Coast stands a sailboat which its owner uses as a restaurant. It used to be the Beatles' boat. Other attractions of the harbor include the realistic proportional imitation of Columbus's ship, the Santa Maria, which a Dutch businessman living on the island had built in the shipyard of Camarade de Lobos. 320 cubic meters of mahogany was used. Besides the 192 square meter sail, the ship is also powered by a 455 horsepower engine. The 22-meter-long, 7-meter-wide ship decorated the wine pavilion at the Lisbon World Fair in 1998. The city park used to belong to the Franciscan monastery. In its immediate vicinity stands the Madeira Wine Company building, a part of which still preserves the basic walls and cellars of the monastery. We can not only taste and buy wine here, but during a guided tour, we can visit the cellars that have a capacity of 10,000 barrels and also an exhibition of winemaking devices. The most famous local producers, among them all the English viticulturists who then lived here, founded the Madeira Wine Association at the beginning of the 20th century. Nearly half of the wine export of the island belongs to them even today. Those who are interested in wine can also visit the Museo de Vinho, which represents interesting facts from the history of Madeira wine. 4 private producers in Funchal are equipped to welcome tourists. The cellars of Barros and Sousa are charmingly old-fashioned places. In Barbato's wine tester, the interior is Art Nouveau, while at D'Oliveira and Borges, the atmosphere is more rustic. The Henriquez cellar in Câmara de Lobos also shows production techniques, and besides wine, they also produce other alcoholic beverages, such as rum and brandy, which are considered local specialties. Madeira wine became fashionable in the 19th century. This noble beverage should only be sipped slowly. The drier ones as an aperitif before a meal, the sweeter ones together with dessert or as digestives. Its 18-volume alcoholic content comes from the brandy made of older Madeiras and is mixed with them. In line with Crown Prince Henrik's order, the Italian Luigi Cadamosto brought the first grapevines from Crete and Greece in 1455. There's also wine made of the Malvasia kind of grapes, but that never became as famous and tasty as that of Madeira. Specialists still debate if that can be attributed to the climate or the production techniques. It was also support for wine spreading that English King Charles II ordered an embargo against America. At this time, Madeira became the only non-European wine in Europe. Its exoticism also made it the favorite drink of the rulers. Peronospora and phylloxera almost totally killed the grape stock. Everything had to be restarted. They brought American kinds that were more disease-resistant, and some years later, the wine of these became almost as excellent as before. Real Madeira is produced in 4 flavors. Malvasia grapes provide a sweet version, Bole semi-sweet, Verdelho semi-dry, and Sercial yields dry wine. The pure version of these can only be tasted after 20 years of aging. The reserved, special reserve, and extra reserve wines, aged for 5, 10, or 15 years, are already mixtures of these kinds, as well as Finis, which, however, is aged for only 3 years. A long queue of taxis is waiting for passengers on the Avenida Arriaga, and they don't wait in vain. In Funchal, many choose to go by taxi instead of renting a car. The main road running parallel to the coast leaves the huge Santa Catarina Park from the right and crosses the square named after the Infant. The Infant was Sailor Enrique, who, though he himself did not sail, had experience planning and supporting explorer journeys. One of the first tangible results was actually Zarco's journey and the occupation of Madeira. The road widens when passing the garden of the former Franciscan monastery and the headquarters of the Wine Association. This is where the usual Christmas decorations are displayed. One of the effects of the Moors was the prospering of wall tile art in Spain and Portugal. These hand-painted and burnt tiles were used mainly in churches, but later also became general in the decoration of residences. The use of the typical blue and white tiles is once again in fashion. João Gonçalves Zarco's statue stands in the middle of the city. He was the first governor of the island. From 1440, he and Tristão Vaz Taxeira distributed their lands among their relatives and friends who had African slaves brought and started to produce sugarcane. Sugarcane had a determinant role for a long time in the life of the island. At this time, the drainage, the lavadas, were constructed to supply the plantations with water. Business prospered for 100 years. Then, due to Brazilian cane sugar dumping, they went bankrupt. The solution was to repackage the cheap sugar arriving by ship and sell it as Madeira sugar at the usual price. The local sugarcane plantations this time were replaced by grape cultivation. However, it took 100 years for Madeira wine to be as profitable as sugar had been. Verne wrote the following about Funchal in 1901. To reach the monastery, tourists had to pass through nearly the whole city of Funchal. The streets surrounded by white houses with green window shutters and wrought iron balconies lined the streets, similarly winding, always without pavement and covered with merciless stones. On the ground floors were shops with an appealing exterior. Some of these offered special products of Madeira. These were embroideries made with agave thread, laces, bulrushes, and small inlaid furniture pieces. Walkers were under a water-resistant canopy of a carro. This was a kind of car which smoothly glided over the brightly polished stones. Pulled by oxen decorated with bells, the carro goes ahead wisely, slowly, driven by a man. The ox carts mentioned here disappeared from the city roads in the 1970s or 80s, leaving the Monte sled behind as the only vehicle. There are various ways of city sightseeing. It's possible, for example, from the waterside, either with the Santa Maria or a less elegant ship. We can drive up to one of the lookouts, but we can also go by huge hot air balloon, which departs from the harbor. There are similar sightseeing balloons in Paris, Rome, Brussels, Berlin, Budapest, and Vienna, and on Tenerife. The balloon departs on the quarter hour when there's no wind. Photos are taken and a personal certificate is made. In clear weather, it's an unforgettable experience. We can, of course, choose a more standard and cheaper form of sightseeing. The open double-decker hop-on, hop-off buses depart from Marina every 30 minutes and make 26 stops. We can get off at any of them, and after visiting the sites, can get on again to the next bus and continue the trip. On the hills of Funchal, several lookout points are available. The decorative plant with red flowers growing under the lookout is aloe vera, very popular with the cosmetics industry. More and more tourists visit Madeira before Christmas just to soak up the festive atmosphere. The entire city of Funchal is flooded in light. All the streets and buildings are brilliantly illuminated. Witty, moving, flashing colored light garlands glitter over the city. Among the figures, there are angels, sleds, and Santa Clauses, and from green neon tubes, a whole forest is planted at this time. Where there's no live music, holiday music comes from loudspeakers. In many houses, decorations show an almost life-size Santa Claus figure climbing on a ladder, roof, or chimney. At this time, private houses and even public ones compete to see who can show something more novel or surprising. During a walk, we pass street sellers' pavilions. The bakers wear rounded, colored, knitted caps, which is the national dress of the mountain people. Their recipes also originate from there. The bolo de chacon is bread pasta made of sweet potatoes, which is baked fresh and spread with garlic butter. The sweet version is similar to donuts and is sprinkled with a mixture of cinnamon and granulated sugar. It's worth tasting both. We can drink mulled wine after it, but if the weather is a bit cold, we can even try the poncha. This is made of sugarcane spirits with honey and lemon. There's a version sold in shops as well, but the real one is mixed in small villages or at the city markets. Tourists preparing for Christmas can surprise their loved ones with real specialties of Madeira. The famous Madeira embroidery is sold in large quantities at this time. Earlier, women on the island made needlework for their own use. Elizabeth Phelps, daughter of an English wine trader, discovered this and ordered tablecloths, napkins, and dresses for resale. Her goods are still popular in London. Later, German business people developed embroidery to a real industry. Using a machine is still prohibited, but the figures are pre-printed in blue color in small firms. Women embroider these at home and deliver them back to the company, where the blue print is washed out, and they add a border, iron them, and pack them. A small lead stamp is put on each one, which is the guarantee for place of origin and quality. Presently, there are 15,000 women who live from this work. Naturally, the biggest holidays on the island are Christmas and New Year's Eve. The brilliant decorative lights can be seen between December 8th and January 6th. On December 31st, there are lavish fireworks. However, we should remember the other holidays as well, as there's one each month. As in many countries, February is the month of carnival time here. In Santana and Funchal, there are carnivals and street dances reminiscent of Rio, and mass entertainment amuses the crowd. At the end of April, there's a flower festival held in the capital to celebrate spring. At this event, there are cars in a parade decorated with flowers and fireworks in the evening. In June, a sheep shearing festival is held in Pal de Serra and a boat procession in Ribeira Brava. The Monte procession in August is the largest mass entertainment of the locals. September is the month for celebrating wine. At this time, Funchal, Câmara de Lobos, and Moniz organize wine festivals. In October, believers are called for a night procession in honor of the miracles of Christ. In November, in several places, chestnut holidays are held, where food and drinks prepared from chestnuts are served. Besides these, exhibitions, sports events, art, and music festivals await the visitors. We can see folklore shows in hotels and restaurants or on larger holidays in the city streets. The musicians and others play on two instruments that are known only here. The braguina is similar to a guitar, while the brinquino is a tambourine. Colorful painted pieces of these are sold as souvenirs. The Carlton Park Hotel and the casino were built in the 1970s when functionality and rough concrete style free of trimmings were in fashion. The casino of the famous Brazilian architect Oscar Niemeyer forms a thorn wreath, just as his earlier work, the Rio Cathedral. Its inner shape is very suitable to entertain tourists starting at the Carlton or in the hotels located a bit farther away. Tickets can be bought on the spot, but often hotels encourage their guests to attend. There are American-style gambling machines, and though elegant dress and tie are not obligatory, they will help. On the upper level, there's a restaurant and a stage. Dinner includes local wine and an international program.
Many good men sing, sing, sing! Come on, babe, why don't we paint the town? And all that jazz, I'm gonna rouge my knees and roll my stockings down. And all that jazz, start the car, I know a wonky spot where the gin is cold, but the piano's hot. It's just a noisy hall where there's a nightly brawl, and all there